If you're looking for a new way to support the podcast, check out Dubby.gg, an energy supplement company trying to make a difference. There you can use code SIDEMISSION for 10% off your order. Thank you to Dubby for sponsoring this episode, and we hope you enjoy.
Welcome into the newest episode of Side Mission. I, like always, am your host, Rusty Ellis, joined by the boys, Kyle Lynch and Matt Beck. And today, we are talking about one of the best games now that has come out in the year 2024, and that is Black Myth Wukong. Oh, wait, we did that last week. No, we're talking about Astro Bot. We're not talking about Wukong anymore. We're done with that sack of shit game. You know, the funny thing is, as of recording, just so everybody can have a peek behind the curtain, so to say, I've not edited that episode. I've tried to stay as far away from that game as possible, and just looking at the name on the sound file makes me mad. So, that being said, let's go ahead and talk about Astro Bot, because Kyle, it was only a mere earlier this year, I believe, when we were talking, we were like, you know what would be awesome? A full Astro Bot game that wasn't VR, because we're not counting that. We're not counting the VR shit that was Astro Bot Rescue. I know it was a good game. I know everyone loves it. But if most of the player base can't play it, then I'm not going to count it. So, and I think that that's pretty fair. So, we were talking, though, Kyle, about how we wanted a full Astro Bot game. And not only did we get one, it pretty much functions as a direct sequel to Astro's Playroom, the pack-in game that we all got on the PS5. We all platinumed it. Matt still hasn't done the speedrun challenges because he's a little bitch. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Matt hasn't done it because he's not good at the game. So I'm kidding about that too. But we all loved it. I think we all are in agreement that we all wanted a full game, Kyle. This game, certainly in, I'd say 90% of the aspects of the game, this game didn't disappoint.
No, not at all. I think that there, are a few critiques that we can get into later, but for the most part, I really just wanted to see a lot of these characters that I grew up with, and man, they went all out. There were characters in this game that weren't even from PlayStation. Well, I mean, I guess they had a big, debut on PlayStation, or it was on PlayStation first, but I mean, there's characters that I didn't even think would be in this game. It was wild. Like, bro, when we saw Fall Guys, that's not a PlayStation exclusive at all, by any means, but I was mind blown. They had a whole fucking level dedicated to it. That shit was cool.
Yeah,
man,
100%.
And Spyro, dude, I was so happy because I didn't know if they were going to be able to actually, get him in, because with Crash, they were kind of able to do, a goofy costume with him. So I knew he would be in the game, obviously, because he was also in Playroom. But when I saw that Spyro was going to be in it, it was funny because they couldn't do a costume. So they literally just made him and put him in as one of the eggs. It was really awesome to see this game really respect the history of PlayStation's characters. A lot of these, games that we grew up with. And I just want to say that my favorite level was the one right after you beat the first boss, where you get to play Ape Escape. That shit was so much fun.
I think that that's one thing I really loved about a lot of the levels, specifically those special levels where you got certain characters from other IPs, is each level felt very unique to the game that it was referencing. Ape Escape feels like Ape Escape. God of War, for God's sakes, you have to hunt down 8 ravens. Like that, again, and not nearly as tedious as in the God of War games in 2018 and then obviously with Ragnarok, but that I felt was really cool that you got to do that. In Uncharted, it's looking for the relics, the eggs that you're looking for. In Horizon Zero Dawn, it's using the bow, using the tripcaster traps. It's using all of those. And I felt like it very much is this game as a whole is a very good love letter to PlayStation's history. Now, I do have more to say about that when we do get to critiques, but I feel like the thing that I loved the most it didn't feel like there were very many PlayStation IPs that were missing from this game. Like, there were IPs that I completely forgot that had exclusivity with PlayStation over Xbox. That, like, for example, and Matt was there for this one, I forgot that Neo, when it comes to consoles, was exclusive to PlayStation. And that it wasn't on the X. I don't believe it was on Xbox, at least. So I know it's on PC, but I don't believe it's on Xbox. I could be wrong. But Neo's in there. And there's not many PlayStation IPs that aren't here. You know, you got the obvious ones. The Last of Us, Uncharted, God of War, Horizon, Bloodborne. You've got the obvious ones. But then you've got somebody who's like, and Matt, you were there and you said you wanted to see my reaction. I personally loved, despite the fact that it's no longer exclusive, I loved that MLB The Show had representation in this game. I loved that a game like Silent Hill and Resident Evil, I know that obviously these games are all playable on other consoles and other systems, but I love that they're here and their presence is as cool as it is. Resident Evil setup on the crash site is just so cool. And the reference to the dogs jumping through the window in the first Resident Evil game, one of the most notorious jump scares of all time. I loved the way that it kind of paid homage to all of these franchises. Like, Matt, that was something I think we all three loved, was on so many levels, it feels like a love letter to PlayStation's history.
Oh yeah, it really does. The funny thing is, right before this game came out, there was an article that came out because we knew that throughout each level that we would be finding different bots that are wearing outfits based off of previous Sony IPs, like that have long been put to pasture, unfortunately, because when you are finding these bots for each level, that's one of those reasons why this game oozes just so much charm, is not just because of like the level design, but just like what they put in the levels. And sometimes the level theme will match the characters that you find. Like, I believe you find Crash roughly around these crates that are filled with the fruits, which was a nice little throwback. On top of that, just the article that I read was just talking about how this game, it is, putting a facade on it that it's a celebration of PlayStation's past, and that the truth to it is that it's more like a graveyard for these characters. And I was just kind of like, I don't see it that way at all. Like, I just think that this is a way for this journalist who wrote the article just to express the fact that he's been very disappointed that Sony has, moved away from so much of, their traditional past, which is a lot of the characters that, excluding the ones that come from like developers like Naughty Dog and Insomniac, but a lot of these characters are, stem from Japan Studios, which is no longer with us since Sony decided once to move their main headquarters from Japan to, California, that they decided to disband, Japan Studio. And Team Asobi is all that's left, and they definitely, showed their respect and the love that they have for these characters, that, no, we don't get to play as them anymore. But the fact is that another reason why they did this is because they want to get people who have maybe never played these games interested. Like, I've seen a couple of people on Twitter talking about how they went and bought the new the Sly Cooper 1 on PlayStation, or how they would go in with PlayStation Premium and you could play Ape Escape. And I think that's fantastic. It's like, no, we may not be getting new games in these franchises, but you're seeing these characters in a game like Astro Bot, and it makes you want to know their history, play their games, and see what it's all about.
I was kind of hoping we weren't going to get to that point until later in the episode, because I actually disagree pretty heavily. I disagree pretty heavily. I think, and I don't want to get into it at this point because we haven't gotten to critiques yet, I do think there's validity to saying that at the same time that this feels like a love letter to PlayStation, it does also feel like, hey, here's a bunch of series that we've done nothing with. And I do think that there is validity to that, because, well, Japan Studios has been shut down, and obviously it's not around anymore. Sony also still owns all these IPs. They own all of them, and they very much could do something with them. Now, we can dive in a little bit deeper into that later. I didn't want to get to that point yet in the episode, but I do think there is some validity to that, because how long has it been since we got, say, a new Twisted Metal? How long has it been since we got a new Jak and Daxter, a new Sly Cooper? I mean, it took forever, and Kyle, you may get a laugh out of this because I think you know what game I'm about to reference. It took a while, though, for another good Ratchet and Clank game to come out.
Oof.
Emphasis on the word good. Heavy emphasis on the word good. Obviously, I'm aware of that game that exists. Heavy emphasis on the word good, though. Regardless, though, back on the positives, I think that in terms of being an excellent platformer, the game excels in just about every mark. I mean, this is a platformer that pushes the best that Nintendo has given us. When you look at recently Mario Odyssey, this pushes Mario Odyssey. Do I think it's better than Mario Odyssey? I don't know. I think that there are things in both games that one does better than the other, but when you think platformer, the first thing you think of is Mario, and this feels like a game on the platforming surface and the platforming genre that it feels made by Nintendo because Nintendo does have a good grasp of what makes a good platform. So I think that it excels in so many marks. Kyle, obviously there's a couple levels in particular that maybe we don't feel that way about, but we'll talk about those in a bit. But I do think that for short games, because Kyle, we've had this discussion a lot, me and you, for short games, that means that the gameplay really has to shine to make up for that lack of, say, bulk. Has to make up for that lack of, I don't want to say lack of substance, because I think this game has a ton of substance, but for the lack of meat on the bones, the gameplay, it really falls on it to make up for that. And I think that this game does everything it can to combat the fact that it pretty much is a 15-hour game, but you feel like you get your money's worth out of it because the gameplay is so tight, is so excellent.
Yeah, and honestly, 14 of those hours will be spent on the Master Challenge. So
yeah, you're not wrong.
I honestly, I think that this being a short game is great. You know, we've said it before. Not every game needs to be 50 hours. Not everybody has time for 50-hour games, and for something like this, I think it's perfect because maybe people who are on a busier schedule that don't have, time to put in to a game like Baldur's Gate, they can pick this up, play it for a little while, and, beat it relatively quickly and move on to the next thing. I think that where this game really excels is how much it rewards you in such a quick amount of time because these levels aren't very long. Some of them are, longer than others, but honestly, the game rewards you pretty consistently with puzzle pieces, with new bots, and, it's always giving you new power-ups to check out. It feels like that constant sense of progression, and before you know it, the level's over. Before I knew it, I had the game beat and platinumed, and I think that that's, a strength rather than a weakness. I don't think that this game needed to overstay its welcome, and there's plenty of replayability if you want to go back and spend more time in it.
Yeah, I think that the best way to put it is not every game, like you said, not every game needs to be a 60 to 70 hour long odyssey that you have to grind multiple weekends playing non-stop and not going outside in order to finish. I think that this is very much a great example of a game that understands what it is and plays to those strengths. And again, 90% of the game is it taking advantage of those strengths. I think that the platforming is as tight as it is. The game is very streamlined. The levels don't feel like they outstay their welcome. Even the most frustrating ones, it feels like once you beat them, you look at them and you're like, in reality, that successful run that I had at that level was only about 45 seconds. Was only about a 45-second run. And you referenced the Great Master Challenge, which we're going to talk plenty about. Don't worry. If you've played the game and you've played that level, don't worry. It's coming. But even that level, it's only about 1.5 to 2 minutes long. It's not a long level by any means. Now, it did give me vibes to another platformer that is exclusive to PlayStation and a certain infamous level in that, but more on that later. Let's talk bosses, because I feel like even the most frustrating ones, Matt, I feel like they took advantage of just about every aspect of the game, of the gameplay itself, because none of the bosses felt similar. None of the bosses, outside of a repeat that I wasn't a big fan of with Genie, didn't feel like that was really a great fight. but they all felt unique. They all felt like, okay, I'm doing things differently to overcome this challenge. And I liked that, Matt. I felt like, again, variety of gameplay in a platformer, it's very easy for it to maybe feel repetitive. This game does everything in its power to avoid that repetitive nature.
Yeah. Yeah, each boss did not feel, same old, same old. Like each one had its own unique, attack pattern, way to defeat it. I really thought that they hit such a home run in the very beginning there in the Gorilla Nebula with that giant, King Kong type boss where you get the dog power up, which basically is like like launches you really really fast, and you're just like breaking his teeth. And at that point, I was like, "Dang, I kind of feel bad. I'm breaking your teeth, bro."
Yeah, bro, I know that can't feel good.
And like I loved it when he splits the platform and it starts tilting. And like there's some challenge there with each boss. Honestly, I think the one surprisingly that killed me the most, I believe, was in Serpent Starway with the giant snake. Once he
Wow,
gets
that
that
one,
point,
dude? Really?
yeah, honestly,
Wow.
yeah, honestly, when he gets that very last section after you're riding on his back. There's a couple of moments there I would die because sometimes I just couldn't avoid those attacks that he sends your way. But I think as far as the one that didn't really stick with me the most, I'd probably say the giant bird and the feather cluster galaxy
Really?
area. Yeah. Yeah, I mean it was cool. It was a spectacle and everything like that. I know some people they didn't really like the chameleon boss, which for me it was okay. It's not they didn't really like it's not the best one, but it's not the worst one in my opinion.
See, I don't know. I thought the bird was a really cool set piece. Was it frustrating? Absolutely, because
Yeah.
it felt like you were having to do a lot of stuff at one time to avoid. But yeah, the chameleon boss was absolutely the bane of my existence when it came to the boss fights. Kyle, I think you might feel the same about that one.
Yeah, the chameleon boss. Honestly, the chameleon and the bird, they gave me the most trouble out of the game, even more than the final boss. The final boss, surprisingly, wasn't really that hard, but dude, what made me really mad is like, so I was on the chameleon's last phase, and I had no hearts because I had gotten hit twice, and I was jumping across the saw blades to get to the final platform, and I fell, and I had to redo the whole damn boss fight over again, and that shit made me
Yeah,
mad.
yeah. There were moments for like that for me in some of these boss fights where it's like the message of the game ultimately is you got to learn to play the first couple of phases of the fight pretty perfectly to preserve your lives because you get 3 on the actual main boss fights. I do feel like one thing that could have improved the smaller boss fights was also giving you lives because some of them, like the second genie fight, I was like, if I had 2 lives, I would feel like my margin for error is a little bit more fair as a whole, but it's neither here nor there. It's not a major complaint I have. It's just something I was thinking of. I was like, why did I get 2 lives on some bosses and not on others? Outside of that, I didn't mind them that much at all. I thought some of the fights were annoying, but none of them were bad. I do want to talk because Kyle mentioned the final boss. The final
Oh
boss of the
yeah.
actual story, that whole set piece is just incredible. That whole set piece of flying on the different consoles and essentially playing some form of Galaga, even though I know it's not PlayStation related. I thought that was awesome. And I thought that what better way to end a story like this than that right there? It felt like an Avengers in-game kind of thing almost, where it's like you're seeing the greatest hits. All these characters are helping you. You're seeing each of the consoles, and I don't know how you two felt about that, Matt. I'll let you talk about it. I thought that was a perfect way to end the story.
Oh yeah, no, that was great. Honestly, watching all of the pieces that you collected in Astro's Playroom, just like the memory cards that they were surfing on memory cards, they were riding the PS3, the PS2, like that was crazy. And I looked back at that moment in Rise of Skywalker where Lando ends up getting that like all of the rebels and everyone across the galaxy just shows up in their ships. I was like, okay, that's cool. This felt better in the movie or in the game than it did in that movie, though. Man,
100%.
that was wild. Oh my gosh, just that right there. I was not expecting them to like have such an epic way to lead up to the final boss fight, but it is definitely a moment in that game that I will replay because rewatch the cutscenes because that was just mind blowing, especially because a lot of the characters are dressed up as Sony characters. It's like they're all working together to finally beat this alien and get the last piece that they need. The GPU.
The CPU,
And,
the CPU,
yeah. And restore the PlayStation 5 back to its full glory. Like that was just great.
I'm amazed, fellas, because it just hit me. I'm amazed we haven't talked about one of the best parts of this game just yet. And Kyle, I'm going to go to you because this is something that you've hammered certain exclusives on. Dude, the DualSense functionality of this game is fantastic.
Dude, I even said that, you should play this game without a headset on just because all the sounds that they have coming out of the DualSense, as well as, the feedback, like, it really, really felt like this game fully utilized it. I think, in a way, I haven't seen any other game on PlayStation do. And a lot of games have come close, but man, holy shit, the amount of different things, like, from, feeling every single step in the water, in the sand, in the grass, to, when you became a tiny little mouse, the steps, got smaller, and they felt, tiny, or when you got huge, when you soak up all the water, they felt chunky, and, it was awesome. I think that this game is something that other devs need to look at and say, how can we use the DualSense like this? Because, I'm not asking for every single little feature, but man, it really reminded me how cool this fucking controller is. Because other than, Astro's Playroom and a couple of games that we got, like Ratchet and Clank and Returnal.
Returnal is one, yeah. Let's say Returnal was one that I thought of.
I don't think that, we've really seen a lot of people utilize the DualSense. This game reminded me how special it is, and I want to see more of it, especially with us being this far into the console's life cycle.
Oh, absolutely. I think this is one of those, like you said, that you've got to, if you're a developer, look at what's being done here and try to see if you can, I don't necessarily think match what it does, but look at how much it can change your game whenever you add these DualSense functions into the game. I think that takes this game to the next level. It really does. So now let's get into critiques. Because despite the fact that this game, we all three love this game. We think it's one of the best that's come out this year. It's not perfect. There are some things that annoyed us. For starters, the void levels. Those are absolutely atrocious. Those are diabolical. That they saw fit in a game that, for the most part, is pretty easy to throw in the uneven difficulty spikes they did with the void levels. And there might not be a ton of them in the game, but Matt, there's just enough for it to annoy the hell out of me. And for me, it certainly did take the enjoyment of the game down a peg, just because of the existence of those levels.
Yeah, I'm going to say, honestly, when you get to those levels, it brought me back to... now, Mario Sunshine is no easy game. Let's not, say that it is. But there's these areas, and Kyle, you know all about them in Mario Sunshine, the floodless levels, where it brought me back to that sort of difficulty spike sometimes. Like it was bordering teetering on between this is easy. I mean, and they're really short levels too, for the most part. But I believe once you get past X and do let it be known, we do here at Side Mission do not say cross, we say X button.
It's X. We're not saying once cross button you start. No, we're not doing that shit.
We do not condone cross. But the first areas levels with the X, it's pretty easy. It's not bad. Then you get to triangle. And then you kind of see where they're going with it. And then you get, is it circle square that's next? And then it's getting to the point where, you want to pull out your hair sometimes. Sometimes you want to break something of yours. I don't condone breaking things, by the way. We have those places where you can go and smash stuff to do that. And
Right,
then
like my DualSense, my red DualSense that was smashed during Armored Core.
uh, but yeah, I mean, for completionists, this game is going to have moments where you will yank out so much of your hair you may have a bald spot. But like outside of like if you have no intention on completing the game and not playing the void levels, you'll be fine. You'll keep your sanity.
Yeah, Kyle, the void levels, they're just the thing that I don't like is they're not fun. Like there's a point where challenge it's just a little overbearing, and the early void levels aren't awful like Matt just said. Like the X levels aren't bad. Like they're a little more difficult than what you've played so far, but they still feel fair. There are some in the circle and square voids that just feel like, okay, how can we make this as BS as possible?
Yeah, dude, the unnecessary difficulty spikes when it came to the void levels really, really pissed me off. And ironically, I actually had the most trouble in the squares and the X's. The triangles and the O's didn't really bother me too much, but dude, I just didn't really like doing them, period, because it was pretty much, yeah, I mean, they weren't super long, but you had to do them deathless. You make one little mistake, especially because you don't have extra hits, you don't have a health bar, so you get touched by any, single spike or hit by any enemy, you gotta redo the whole thing over, and it was, I don't know, it was really annoying, and it felt tedious, and I think that if you left them out, it would have been fine.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. So, Matt, this next part I'm going to let you talk about. And okay. I'm going to give you 3 words, and I'm going to let you go. Great Master Challenge. Go on ahead.
Okay, yes. I remember when I got to this section because, once you collect, it was like 300 bots, you get to build this ladder in the main hub area that will take you up to what is called the Grand Master Challenge. And this is the part in the game where all 3 of us felt the same, and where the love and everything we had for the game, like there was that little dent that just got put right there on the side of your car. Man, the obstacles that they put in this game, if you go into this and you haven't seen a single video, bless you, because your sanity is still intact. But just from the very beginning, you have to jump across the several buttons, like the X, the square, the O, the triangle. That's not too bad. Well, hey, there's this guy spinning this giant, what do we call those things? A flail?
Yeah.
And, it's not so bad. We face these guys in the main story. Now we get to the 2 giant bells who are sending these shockwaves across the platform. But at the same time, there's a bird where they will, you encountered them before, so you know what to do. But take those 3 things, or take those 2 things, take 2 of those bells, 1 of those birds, and put them side by side so close together and get that timing just right. And it just gets worse and worse because they introduce ice, so you'll be like sliding around all over the place. Sometimes enemies will do stuff that they didn't do on a previous run. It was just a load of shit.
And that's putting it mildly. That's putting it very... I would like for everyone to know that I am on a morning show for the radio station where I live, and I had to go do that morning show on 2 hours of sleep because of how that level took over my night. I started it at 10:30.
Oh, yeah.
I did not finish until close to 2 a.m. I didn't beat it. It took that long. That level for completion is awful. And there were a myriad of deaths in there that I don't believe were my fault. I believe some of it is on the game, because I have often had the conspiracy theory for hard levels or for hard games that the moment the game's AI feels you getting close, it hands you a couple bullshit deaths just to knock you back a little bit and to piss you off to make you die in stupid ways you wouldn't normally die before. Might be a conspiracy theory, it might be a skill issue, but I very much felt that way with the Great Master Challenge at several points. So now we can delve into the topic that I wanted to save until Matt so graciously brought it up about 5 minutes into the episode. Thanks, by the way, Matthew. But I do think there is. I know. Yeah, you wouldn't have. You had no way of knowing. I'm not actually annoyed with you at all. I do think there is a fair topic of conversation to be had that while the game is a love letter to PlayStation's history, there's also several IPs in there that we've not seen in, for some, well over a decade. And I think that that's a fair criticism. I think it's a fair criticism that Sony has had a lot of IPs at its disposal, yet it sees fit instead to remaster The Last of Us for the upteenth time. I love The Last of Us, but it didn't really need a remake or a remaster. It was good as it was. I loved the remake and I loved the remaster. However, it didn't really need it. And now, with the news that has come out as of recording today on the 18th of September, that the USRB has rated a Horizon Zero Dawn remaster for PS5, that point gets made even more. And side note, and this is not an episode on that. We could do an episode on that. It's up to y'all if we all want to. It doesn't matter to me. But Horizon is not the franchise that Sony really wants it to be. It's not. And that's the nice way of saying it. It's a good franchise. It's not a genre or a generation-defining franchise by any means. So off of that point, I mentioned a few earlier, Jak and Daxter, Sly Cooper. I mean, hell, we've not gotten a Silent Hill game in how many years? Like, we're getting Silent Hill 2, a remake later this year, but we've not gotten a new one in how long? Like, there are a myriad of franchises that could have gotten the treatment that you gave to some of these franchises that are mentioned here, and I can't help but feel like this is a slap in the face to some of those fan bases, and to an extent. I'll even apply it to a game that I really love. Bloodborne is very prevalent in this game, and yet Sony owns the IP. There's been no plans on a sequel. It's not been remastered when that's a game that could use a good remaster. Oh, yeah. It frustrates me a little bit. So I'll let you two kind of talk about however y'all feel about it. If y'all disagree, y'all can say it, and we can discuss it. It's fine. It doesn't matter to me if we agree or not. But I just can't help but feel like to dismiss people that feel like, hey, like, that feel this way, that, hey, like, there's a lot of IPs that you have, despite a clear message that was sent, I believe, last week of Sony not having faith in some of their IPs that they own. Yeah. There still absolutely is love for some of these IPs. You're the company that's chosen to do nothing with them. So I'll let whichever one of you wants to take that and expand, I'll let y'all go from here.
Honestly, I think that it's wild they really made a statement saying that, like, you know, that shit about them not having enough IPs or not having enough faith in them. Like, look at how many IPs this game has referenced. I mean, dude, it took somebody else doing something with your IPs, you know, for you to even say their name, bro. How long have we been asking for Ape Escape? Or, like you said, Sly Cooper, you know? A lot of these games, I miss them, and I want new games. I understand if developers move on and want to do other things, but if Sony still owns the IP, and they own a lot of companies, then be like, hey, can you guys make one of these games? See how good, you know, see if you can do a good job at it. If they don't, then it is what it is. You keep trying, but I'd rather they keep trying new formulas, keep trying new things, or keep getting new developers to take on these IPs than them just be dead for 20 years and be like, oh, you know, here's a remaster. Remember this game?
Remember this?
Yeah, and you know, I love this game for what it did, and I think that it will be nice to see people kind of get introduced to a lot of these characters and be like, oh, they look interesting. I want to go check out their games. At the same time, welcome into a fan base that hasn't gotten an update in 2 decades. Like it's kind of sad. It hurts. I feel like it goes both ways. I feel like it shows a lot of love to these IPs, but it also is a harsh reminder that Sony doesn't give a fuck.
Matt, what do you think? Do you have any more thoughts on that?
I mean, I do have quite a few. One thing I just want to mention, as far as like how they use these IPs with the bots and everything, is man, hey, shout out for including Concord in here, man. Like, look at all of the freaking skeleton bots.
Skeletons, man.
Honestly, when just like PlayStation fans, Nintendo fans also, had like the whole dormant IPs thing where, we haven't seen a proper F-Zero or a Star Fox in years. So it's kind of like
a new Donkey Kong, yeah.
And a new Donkey Kong, like, yeah, we had Tropical Freeze on the Wii U, but Jesus Christ, that was so long ago. And then they're just, porting everything over to the Switch pretty much. But yeah, no, it's honestly, it's really such a shame to see these fantastic, iconic characters that we grew up with, just not being used. I mean, the last time PlayStation really did anything with them was on the PlayStation 4. We got a 4 Sly Cooper game. They did a remake, a remaster, or whichever you want to call it, of Medieval, which was, we hadn't seen since the PlayStation 1 days. I mean, they even temporarily once brought back Jak and Daxter for a PlayStation Vita game, I believe. But just honestly, like, I think one thing that Sony should do is let their studios make the games that they want to make, but they also maybe need to create smaller new studios and nurture them, and maybe let them use these new IPs, because like way back when before I even got my PlayStation 3, the game that caught my attention because it just brought back so much of like that old playstyle and that magic that I know that Sony's studios are able to do was Little Big Planet. And now, outside of Sackboy, Little Big Planet has not had a game in the mainline franchise in years, and I don't think we will ever see that again. Just like I don't personally believe we'll ever see Jak and Daxter or Ratchet and Clank will be back, obviously. I 100% believe we'll see them back again. But and Uncharted, it's not even that old of a franchise, but it's now starting to get that same type of treatment where we may never see another game in that franchise again. And I don't want to see that happen, because I think Nathan Drake is a fantastic character, Sully and all of them. I would love to see them come back for another game, but Naughty Dog doesn't want to do that. Right now they're making a new IP before we even get the third Last of Us. So I'll probably be about 50 years old when that happens. I just wish that Sony would take advantage of all these characters, especially with what Kyle said earlier about how they came out and they said, we don't feel like we have enough IPs for, different, things across different types of media, movies and TV shows and video games. And I'm like, you're literally sitting on a treasure trove of characters, and Team Asobi literally, showed you these characters, and they're showing people who may have never seen them before. Showed them, like, you have every opportunity to bring them back. I mean, you are freaking PlayStation, for God's sake.
No, I think that the last thing I'll say on this before we wrap this episode up is I think that what you said earlier about other players going back and playing through the Sly Cooper games on PlayStation Premium or playing Ape Escape or doing any of that, I think that's an argument that it works both ways. Because what that tells me is, hey, there's still plenty of interest in these IPs. You could absolutely still make use of them. You've chosen not to. So I hope that this is a wake-up call for Sony that, hey, there's still plenty of franchises you have that people value and love. It's on you, though, to take care of those fan bases. It's on you to make those players happy. So does not change that Astro Bot is a phenomenal game. It's a great platformer, and I'm sure when we do our top 10, it will rank, I'd imagine, pretty high. Where will it rank? Well, you'll have to tune in December to find out about that, obviously. So that is going to wrap up this episode of Side Mission. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Side Mission Pod. You can follow us on Facebook as well at Side Mission Podcast. For the boys, for Kyle and Matt, I'm Rusty. Thanks for listening.